Yes, let's go. Welcome to the show, IB Nation Sports Talk, up and rolling. I'm Sean Stires. Vince DeDario is back today. We have survived a storm that rolled through the area just a little bit ago. Man, it was pretty intense there for a while.
The wind is what was the kind of not scary. I'm not going to go that far, but the wind was howling. Like, the cover from the patio furniture was flying away and the trees were doing their thing. And,
I know.
It was enough that everybody in my house was like up against the window, like, oh, that kind of thing. But so storms are a big deal in my house. Everybody loves the storms.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before. We've got the patio table with one of those umbrellas in the middle of it, in the back.
Yep.
And it was within a couple of months of, just my wife had just bought it, and the umbrella, she left it up.
Ooh.
And I think it was when it was at some point, I think it might have been the summer of 2020 now that I think about it, because
this is new house.
Yeah, we were definitely in the new house.
Okay.
And I was doing the radio show from home.
Okay.
So I know it was in that period someplace. And then the show is, apparently someone was knocking on the door while I was doing the show, but, my daughter's in the other room. She can't get the door.
Right.
And, nobody else was here. And, she tells me somebody was knocking. I go outside. The umbrella's on the roof. And our neighbor, was coming over to say, hey, your umbrella's on the roof. And a couple weeks later, it ended up on the roof again. And finally,
oh wow!
I said, honey, we need to, when
you got to bring it
we're
in.
Not out there, we need to keep it down.
Yeah, got to bring it in. We have the
Turns
same
into
setup.
A nice parasail. That's right.
We have the same setup, but whenever we're not using it, it's got to be in the garage, because you and I have similar like open backyards where the wind will just fire through. So yeah, that'll be like a parasail if we leave it out there. So
looks like it's raining all over the world right now.
Oh, wow.
Irish storms rocking now here in SWFL. I'm guessing that's Southwest Florida. So, and I know they can be more intense down there. It's obviously, you have to worry about hurricanes and that kind of stuff if it is Florida. So batten down the hatches and
right.
Hopefully everybody is okay. At least, we made it through okay. My wife was taking my daughter for a hair appointment right as the storm was starting. So that's fun.
Oh no.
I know. Before I forget, don't forget to hit that YouTube like button and subscribe and rate, comment, and all that good stuff on the podcast platforms as well. It helps us out greatly with the Irish Breakdown channel. So be sure and do that. So again, glad to have you along with us here tonight as we get things going on the show. And we've spent all week so far preparing for fall training camp, the start of training camp on Friday. We are 2 days away from the start of fall training camp, 31 days away from Notre Dame and Ohio State. We're basically a month away at this point. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's the 3rd. I didn't even think about that.
It's exactly a month away, and still doesn't quite feel like it. Doesn't feel like we're going to be at practice on Friday, but you and I will both be there holding down the fort, trying to figure out what's going on, and maybe, just maybe, get some of these questions answered that we have today.
Yes. Well, we will find out. So again, we're fall camp focused, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about some position battles. There really aren't as many significant battles as in some years, but there are still some just the same. And we're going to we're going to go through these here tonight. And let's start with quarterback.
Yes.
Everyone pretty much discusses this as if it's a foregone conclusion, I think. Vince, what do you think about this? Is this an actual open competition between Tyler Buckner and Drew Pine, or is it a foregone conclusion and Buckner's just going to end up being the quarterback?
It's funny because I feel like I hope it is a competition in that I believe Tyler Buckner is going to win, but I want Drew Pine to push Tyler as much as humanly possible, because I don't want it to just be a situation where, Buckner is, I guess he's going to start. You know what I mean? Like, not that kind of a thing. Like, well, he's got the better tools and whatnot, so he's just going to start. Like, I don't want that. I want there to be I want Drew to give it everything he's got. You got to push Tyler. You've got to want it just as bad as Tyler wants it. You've got to push him to make Tyler earn that job. So I hope that it's a competition. I really do. I don't see Drew winning it, but here's the thing.
Right.
Drew has shown enough in games, in my opinion, to be and respected enough within the locker room that he deserves this to be a competition. He does. He's done enough to me for this to be a competition.
Yeah,
Tyler,
that's fair.
Tyler hasn't done enough to where he should just be named the starter. He's done some very impressive things. He's been really good from everything we've heard, but I think it needs to be a competition. I hope it's a competition. I hope it's not a foregone conclusion. I really do.
Yeah, there's just such a different skill set, obviously, that you get with Drew Pine. And when talk about, especially when you're lacking running backs and all this different stuff, and you need to run the ball.
Yep.
We know that he has that element that Drew Pine is not going to give. I think Drew Pine was an adequate enough backup last year, and everything about Drew Pine, there's a lot to like about the guy. But and I think you're right, because he's been around. He went through a quarterback competition with Jack Cohn last year.
Right. Sure.
Did not come out on top, obviously, ended up being the backup. And really, as the season wore along, we didn't see him after what was that? Wisconsin, basically, right? Yeah.
That's kind of a coming out party for him, too.
We saw him Wisconsin and Cincinnati. That's when we saw him. Yeah. Wisconsin, Cincinnati. And then we didn't see him the rest of this, season. So, I agree. The biggest issues with Drew Pine have been completion percentage.
Correct.
He needs to be more accurate with his passes. Again, as a backup, he was adequate last year, but to be the full-time starter, that was my question going into the spring and into the spring game. And obviously you don't want to put everything on one game, but at the same time, we did not see the best of Drew Pine by any means.
No.
In the blue gold game. And so that's the lingering memory that everyone has of Drew Pine. But what was his issue is still his issue, the accuracy. And then you saw some red flags in terms of decision making, on top of it in that blue gold game. And that's against your own defense, obviously.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, the blue gold game is a practice, right? I mean, and that's the way it needs to be talked about, right? It's a practice. But here's the thing. There was a lot of other practices in the spring that led up to that practice where he wasn't winning the job. And that's just, it is what it is. He didn't have a great spring. Call it what it is. He didn't have a great spring.
He needed to have a great spring, and he didn't have one.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then he was thrust into a situation where he needed to be the quarterback for both teams, going back and forth. And that's hard no matter who you are. And so not only did he not have a great spring, but then he kind of was put behind the 8 ball in the spring game by having to be basically the all-time quarterback, right? I mean, and that's tough. That's not an easy thing to do. So he needs to hit the reset button, in my opinion, with fall camp. And he has earned the right to do that. And so I hope that that's the case. He can kind of flush what happened in the spring and then just kind of move forward and be the competition that he needs to be.
Yeah. I think if it becomes obvious early on, though, I think it's time to name your starting quarterback. Jesse and I were talking yesterday, last year, Pine and Jack Cohn came into fall, and there's still this, they're still battling it out to figure out who's going to be the starter. Well, by the end of the first week, it didn't even take a week, I think, Jack Cohn was named the starting quarterback. How soon do you think they need to name a starter? Not how soon will they, how soon do they need to name a starter, do you think?
It depends on, are we talking about naming a starter inside the locker room, or are we talking about naming a starter in the public, like to the media? Because I think those are two different answers, to be honest with you, right? I think, 2 weeks in, 1.5, 2 weeks in, if as long as the locker room knows who the starter is, that's all I care about. I don't need Marcus Freeman to be up front with the media and tell them who the starter is, even if we pretty much know who it is anyway. I'm not saying he needs to play games with the first game of the season, but you don't need to put all your cards on the table either.
That's true.
If he never says it to us, okay, that doesn't bother me. It really doesn't. It needs to be established in practice, though. Like, it needs to be established within the walls of the locker room.
Well, and the thing is, at practice, it kind of becomes obvious, based on who's getting the reps and all that kind of stuff, and
For sure.
obviously with performance as well. But at the same time, I said this going into the blue gold game because it's going to be on TV and all that stuff. From Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees and Notre Dame's perspective, even though you'd like to have Tyler Buckner out there for everybody to see, it was not the worst thing in the world for him not to play in that game because
Agreed.
Ohio State doesn't get to see what a full-blown Tyler Buckner offense looks like. Even if you're dumbing it down, they know he can run,
Sure.
but, they didn't get to see a full-blown Tyler Buckner-led offense. So that wasn't the worst thing in the world. And, that kind of piggybacks on what you're saying. Like, yeah, the locker room is probably the players are going to know at some point,
Absolutely.
if they don't already, who's performing the best and who it's going to be. But, like you said, saying it publicly, he doesn't have to go like Jim Harbaugh and never give a depth chart and, never, announce anything basically. But yeah, I mean, from his perspective, I suppose he doesn't really need to name a starting quarterback publicly based on the fact that, again, you've got two guys with two different skill sets.
Absolutely. And I think you make a really good point about the fact that he didn't play in the spring. I mean, if you want to see Tyler Buckner sitting in the pocket, going through reads and all of that, you're going to have to pop in his junior high school film.
Yeah.
I mean, and so many things have changed since then, right? That's 3 years ago. And he's got different weapons around him. They're running a different scheme, all of these different things. So that's a really good point. There's no film of Tyler Buckner as the starting quarterback for the University of Notre Dame playing with the ones. It doesn't exist. And so that's an ace in your pocket. Now I guess you can say, hey, we're going to start this kid. And maybe it doesn't even matter because there's no film on him. Okay, that's fine too. You know what I mean? So I'm really okay either way as far as the media end of it, the public end of it. But yeah, it needs to be established before you start your Ohio State prep. Your specific Ohio State prep, it needs to be established by then, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's move on. Let's look at some other position battles. We'll see how long that quarterback battle lasts, and, what Marcus Freeman's strategy is and all that kind of stuff. But in the meantime, we've got some other position battles as well, beginning with boundary corner on the defensive side, manned, of course, last year by Clarence Lewis, everyone's stepchild,
favorite dog to kick, basically.
That's right. Right. Everyone wants to pick on Clarence Lewis. You've got some guys behind him, Ryan Barnes, Philip Riley, guys, the good thing is a lot of these guys, Jaden Mickey as well. We talked about him last year. He's played more field so far on the other side with Cam Hart, but they want to find the best guy, obviously, to play opposite of Cam Hart. What do you think about this situation and how it maybe plays out this fall?
It's actually very similar to the way I feel about the quarterback battle, quote unquote, right? Because, Clarence Lewis, I think, is your presumed starter going into fall. I mean, if we get a depth chart on Friday, I'm sure that number 6 is going to be at the top of the depth chart at that spot because he's a returning starter. He deserves at least that, right? Now, I don't want it to be a situation where he's going to be starting on September 3rd because he happens to be a returning starter and he's the best of whatever they got left. That's not a comfortable situation for me as a Notre Dame fan or as an analyst.
Yeah.
It's just not. What I want is a to the death competition where, Ryan Barnes, Jaden Mickey, Philip Riley, those guys are just banging on the door for playing time and just pushing and pushing and pushing. And if Clarence Lewis is the guy that rises to the top, he's the cream of that crop. That's the ideal situation for me personally, because he's got the experience. He has played well. And if he beats out all of those guys that all want playing time, legitimately beats them out, I think that's the best case scenario personally. But if one of those guys beats him out, then so be it. I mean, it is what it is. It's competition. They're recruiting guys that can play championship level football. So if other guys beat him out, then so be it. I would put my money on Ryan Barnes if to be the case, if that were to happen. But I think at the end of the day, I do feel like Clarence Lewis is going to be the starter.
Yeah, I kind of do too. And, if he's the best option at the end of fall, then you have to go with your stop, I think like even if some of these guys are close, I realize everyone's wringing their hands about it. Clarence Lewis was not, horrible over the course of 13 games. He had a really bad 13th game. He had some moments over the course of those other 12 games where he had an issue or two, but that you can say that I think to everyone in the secondary as they were getting used to the new scheme and, more man-to-man and all those different things. And like, if you look at the Fiesta Bowl specifically, remember now, Oklahoma State in that second half where he really struggled, they were playing they were out there with 10 personnel. They didn't even have a tight end on the field. They just put as many wide receivers as they could out there, with a running back and a quarterback. And, that led to a lot of the issues as well. Those guys were, so I agree with what you're saying. You really want it to be a competition throughout the fall. And I think it is going to be a competition in the fall. I think we're going to see a lot of guys out there, in some different spots, and enough of these guys had good springs that they have, shown themselves that they deserve some of these opportunities. And I'll be really curious, just to see sort of what the rotation looks like and how they go about that competition and how it evolves over the course of the next 30 days or so, leading up to Ohio State.
And I'm interested to see if it's going to be obvious to us who are in the media and are observing practice number one, what that depth chart looks like. You know what I mean? Coming out of the summer, coming out of spring, the whole deal. Like, what does that depth chart look like going into the fall camp season? And I think that's actually going to tell us a lot. Did Jaden Mickey jump everybody? Is he the number 2 guy? Is it Ryan Barnes? Is it Phillip? Like, who is that? And then also on the other side, who are they taking out of that competition and keeping behind Cam Hart? Because I think that is actually something that's going to be interesting to see as well, right? So, a lot to see. I think we're going to be have writer's cramp by the time that things.
I was going to say, I think our heads are going to be spinning trying to keep up with what numbers are out there on the field at any given time in a lot of these reps.
Agreed. Yeah. So it's going to be very interesting to see what we come out with on Friday during our practice report. That's for sure.
Charlie Weiss's last belt loop makes the comment in the YouTube chat. Lewis got picked on all last year. He had like 53 tackles. That's a lot at corner. And it wasn't just like 53 tackles, 53 tackles. We talked about this a couple of days ago, and we were talking about players to watch. And Vince had Clarence Lewis as one of his players to watch. I had Jaden Mickey as one of mine. And they obviously, for the same reason, and that's a fair comment. Yeah, he did get picked on, but what do you do if you're an opposing team and you've got Cam Hart on the other side? You're not going to throw at Cam Hart if Clarence Lewis is on the other side. You're going to take your chances with Clarence Lewis, and that's what they did. And as I said, somewhat, jokingly, but at the same time serious, the fact that he did have 53 tackles, which is a lot for a corner, at least he made the tackles. After he gave up. It wasn't just guys running downfield and he's chasing them downfield. At least he made tackles after they made the catch. Many of them, I'd say, half of them for shorter gains, So, it's, they're going to, again, bottom line is you're going to pick on the guy that you think that you can pick on. And that, the more chances that a guy has, to be thrown at, the more potentially he's going to give up, so it's, again, it's kind of a chicken and egg situation,
absolutely.
But, there's only room to improve, I think, for Clarence Lewis, because he's shown at times in the span of his freshman and sophomore year that he can do it.
Well, and here's the other thing. I don't care who you stick at that corner spot, no matter what number it is on the jersey, that's the guy that's going to get picked on. That's just a fact, right? Whether it's number 6 or 15 or 21 or whoever you put over there, they're not going after Cam Hart. They're just not going to. He's that good. Yeah. And so whoever that is, they're going to get picked on. And so that person's going to have a lot of pressure on them to shut down that strategy. So
don't forget, because even if Clarence Lewis gets beat, Ohio State's going to go at whoever happens to be sitting over there on that other side of the field more often than not early on, rather than go at Cam Hart,
Absolutely.
So. All right. But again, it's going to be a really interesting battle to see if one of these young guys step up. And, the other side of this is obviously this has been an area, the secondary, it's been an area that needed to improve from a recruiting standpoint, and it is beginning to improve now with Mickens and Freeman, and just like at other spots, it's getting better, but it's still like where they are right now. We're just not quite seeing that yet. Maybe we start to see that with some of these promising young guys.
Absolutely.
What about
I hope we
Nickel?
do. Nickel,
yeah.
It's funny because Nickel almost feels like the consolation prize to whoever may not win the other corner spot, right? But it's not exactly like that. To me, I feel like this is a two-man race for this job. I think it's going to be between Tariq Bracy, and I think he's the leader in the clubhouse. And I think the other one that's going to challenge him is Jaden Mickey. I think those are the two, in my opinion, who are going to challenge for that nickel spot. Everything that I've heard from from inside the Goog is that they love Jaden Mickey at the nickel spot too. And so I think he's going to challenge Tariq Bracy for that spot. But again, I think Tariq Bracy is in the pole position for that. And again, ton of experience, et cetera, right? He's a grad student. He's been around the block. He's been here for a really long time. So I think he's going to get the first crack at it. But I think that freshman, man, I think you're going to see 21 nip it at his heels an awful lot.
Yeah, I think so too. And I guess we didn't really mention that when we were talking about the corner, that Bracy did play, some outside during the spring, and maybe that's an option for him. I don't know where that goes. I still think he's really that nickel spot is where he has really found his niche, and he's been pretty good. And the fact that, like, I saw this on Pro Football Focus, they say that Notre Dame has played 5 defensive backs on more than 50% of snaps defensively over the last 2 years. So it's obviously an important spot.
Yeah, no doubt.
You've got to have somebody, who can, it's not just a third down type spot,
right.
when you're playing at 50% of the time. And, that's the proliferation of passing offenses and all that stuff in college football. So it's very important. And, again, Jaden Mickey turned some heads in the spring. So I think one way or another, even if he's not the starter, we're going to see Jaden Mickey over the course of the season, just depending on, where it happens to be, whether it's inside or outside. But I think we're going to, Lewis and Bracy, I still think we're going to see them too. But, again, what this looks like in the fall, that's what's really intriguing right now.
Yes, no question about that. So,
we had all these months of speculation, and now we finally start to, get to see some answers.
Oh, finally. Finally. It feels like we've been talking about this stuff forever, and I get it. I understand, but these are legitimate, they're legitimate battles, a legitimate question mark going into the season. And if they can be answered in a positive way, this team is going to be pretty stinking good.
Right. I still remember the days when, like, these corners, it's like they never turn their heads and, all these different things. And those days are gone. Again, the talent level is improving. The coaching level is improving of what they had at those positions. So, there's a lot to like, and, that Ohio State game, whatever, it's like, it's a month early. I'm already saying this. Don't get, like, too wrapped up one way or the other. What happens there?
Agreed.
It's like, that's
I absolutely agree. I was listening to your guys' mailbag yesterday, and you made a really good point. You guys were talking about, is Notre Dame a national championship contender, right? And you make a really good point. Yeah, they are until September 3rd. Then we're going to know whether they are or not. I mean, that's, if they win or if it's a close loss, that kind of a thing, you're going to know really quickly whether Notre Dame should be mentioned with the elites. Because it's a tough first test. There's no question about that.
Absolutely. And, the good thing is with a playoff, again, and I'm not, saying, play for a close game or whatever, play for a consolation prize. Obviously, you're playing to win, but if it's at least a competitive game, it's the start of the season on the road, all these things, like I said yesterday, you're still going to be in the thick of things. There's just less margin for error.
Absolutely. You got to probably run the table if you lose, but you're absolutely right. And let's be honest, Notre Dame hasn't been competitive in the playoff games that they've played in. Ohio State is a playoff caliber team. This is an opportunity to show that you can compete. That to me, that's the bottom line. Whether they win or whether they lose, they've got to be competitive. They have to be. And if they're not, this is a longer road than I thought. I hate to say it that way, but
I'm just chuckling at salty Virginia peanuts. I kind of wish the season weren't about to start. I'd like 3 more months of increasing uncertainty in quarterback recruiting. I need to get a bell. I need to get a bell and like ding the bell whenever we have either,
Bring
funny or
SSS
really
bell.
salient points. That's right. That's right. Remember that back in the day we had a bell.
I do. It was whenever you had a nugget. Bing.
That's right. That's right.
Yep.
All right, safety. Just like last year, we know who one of the safeties is going to be. Last year it was Kyle Hamilton. This year it's Brandon Joseph. But you've got a lot of other guys who, again, I think we're going to see a lot of these guys because they've made it. With this defensive scheme, they're really interchangeable. You're not just one side or the other. That's kind of how they want it. And maybe I don't know. It's 3 defensive coordinators ago at this point when Clark Lee was here, when we saw 3 safety type stuff. But, if guys show that they're capable, again, maybe we see, more than just 2 safeties out there for that matter. But you've got guys like Ramon Henderson, DJ Brown, Xavier Watts, Houston Griffith, all in the mix for this thing. So, what do you think it looks like? Do you think it's just going to kind of be a, situational second safety playing next to Joseph back there?
It's funny because I have gone through spurts since spring. I should say since the Fiesta Bowl, to be honest with you. I've gone through spurts where it's like, okay, it's going to be Ramon Henderson. Well, you know what? It might be DJ Brown. I'm hearing a lot of good things about him. Houston Griffith is due to, make some noise here. But, then again, there's Xavier Watts who's been doing his thing over on defense, and he's a great athlete. How could he not play? You know what I mean? There's a whole host of guys that if they were named the starter at the second safety, it would not surprise me in any way.
Yeah.
And I feel like whatever decision they make, it's going to be the best of whoever's there. And I think they've got some really good options, to be honest with you. I love what I saw from Ramon Henderson, and he was only a safety for half a season.
I know.
I thought he did a really good job. I thought Xavier Watts has shown flashes of being really, really good. DJ Brown, I thought he played pretty darn well, if I'm not mistaken, in the Oklahoma State game when he got in. I mean, he can tackle. He can, there's certain things that he brings to the table that makes him better than some of the other guys, right? So I think this one's a huge toss. This might be the biggest question mark to me as far as who is going to end up winning that spot. And I don't think I would be disappointed no matter who got it. I think that's where I'm at with this. And I
think so too. And, no, but, they got a huge gift when Brandon Joseph, when they were able to get him out of the transfer portal. He's playing for this season for an NFL draft spot, and, he'll be gone. Houston Griffith will be gone. But because you've got so many of these other guys, and I think they're all going to be out there at some points this season, a year from now, it's going to be a different different conversation.
Sure.
At position. But, again, we're going to see a lot of these guys this fall, and I think over the course of the season as well.
Yeah, because you're this is DJ Brown's last year, most likely. This is Houston Griffith's last year, right? Depending on what kind of season Brandon Joseph has, this could be his last year. So You're right. The safety position is going to be a heck of a lot different going into next year. Plus, you get the incoming freshman as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see what safety looks like next year. But they got a great opportunity as a launching pad for this year into next year, I think. And they need to take advantage of it because you don't want to waste the talents at number 16, who's Brandon Joseph. This kid's a stud. I am so looking forward to seeing him run around the field and make plays and come downhill like a Scud missile. I think he's going to be fun to watch.
Yep. Big defensive end. That's the basically like strong side, I guess, defensive end, the defensive end opposite the Viper. Riley Mills is at the top of the depth chart, and he's the biggest of these guys. Nana Osafa-Mensah behind him, and then Alex Ahrensberger. I mean, whether it's Mills or Osafa-Mensah, again, the way they've been able to rotate, I think we're going to see a lot of both of them, and Riley Mills will play inside a little bit as well. My curiosity is what happens with Ahrensberger at this point, because, he came in, he was one of these raw talents that MikeElt, obviously coming out of Germany even, but one of these raw talents that guys, that Mike Elston was able to develop over time. Do you think that he's able to make any kind of dent at all at this position this year?
I actually do. I think it's going to be a battle between Ahrensberger and Osafa-Mensah for that number 2 slot.
Okay.
And, whoever wins that is going to get a lot of playing time, frankly. And I think Ahrensberger is kind of a sleeper in this whole thing. Nana has been, fighting injury and fighting just kind of the light bulb thing. You know what I mean? Like he was kind of a big ball of clay when he came here. And obviously there's been a coaching change and some things like that. It sounds like he's doing a good job, but Ahrensberger is just kind of like that lioness, like in the weeds, like ready to pounce. Like that's what I feel like he is. I mean, he's 6'6", almost 6'7". So he's long. He's so long and athletic that if the light bulb goes on for him, I hate to say it because I love Nana coming out of high school. I think Ahrensberger is going to win that number 2 spot. And I think that he could really do a lot of damage. I think he could really surprise a lot of people. The combination of Mills, he's 6'5", 283. I mean, he's just a specimen. And then you bring in Ahrensberger's a little bit faster, I think, a little bit more athletic, a little bit longer. I think that could be a pretty deadly combo there at that big end spot.
Yeah, there's a lot of different options. And I think you're right. I think, it's Mill. I think the battle is more between Osafa-Mensah and Ahrensberger than it is Osafa-Mensah and Mills at the top. It's more, the battle for that number 2.
Well, it looks like we may have lost Sean. I don't know if we've lost him or we've lost me. So let me see if he is. It looks like he's just paused. I don't know if anybody's in the chat can let me know kind of where things settle, if you can hear me or if you can hear Sean.
There we go. I think we were spinning there for a little bit. We both unlocked about at the same time.
I love this right here. Charlie Weiss's last belt loop. He goes, "It froze, Vince. Send me a link. I'll co-host for you."
Nice.
That's great. That's great. Well, welcome back.
Well, it froze me too, so I don't know. Like, I who knows? John Banco said, "We hear Vince, and hopefully they're hearing both of us now, because I hear you and you hear me, and the video is churning once again."
I think we're good now. I think you and I are good now. So, so welcome back. But
yes,
I think Mills is the clear starter at this point. So it's kind of that battle for the number 2 spot, which I think is going to be a good battle. I don't know why. My gut just tells me that Ahrensberger, it might be that guy. And I think he's going to surprise a lot of people.
I'd like to see it. I wouldn't mind seeing it. Yeah. All right. Again, this is more depth chart stuff. We know Michael Mayer is going to be the number 1 tight end. That is obvious. But the number 2 tight end, I would expect whoever the number 2 tight end would be used more as like the Y role, the guy attached to the line of scrimmage, than Mayer, because he's going to line up all over the place, basically, especially not knowing what's going on with the receivers. And, Mitchell Evans had the foot surgery not quite a month ago, I guess. It was middle of July when that happened. He was in line to be number 2. That's obviously changed now. So now you've got Kevin Bauman battling with Kane Barong, for that number 2 spot. And then you've got a couple of freshmen who are really undersized at this point, Eli Raridan and Holden Stays, who are like 6'4" and 6'6", between, both of them weigh 225. So, they need a little more Bayless. I don't know how much they were able to pack on this summer. Maybe we'll see a little bit of that. I did see that picture of the tight ends recently. They do not have the guns of Michael Mayer just yet.
No one does.
But I would think Bauman, has probably got the leg up in this spot, because he had a really good fall camp and then unfortunately broke that leg in the season opener last year. Assuming that he's able to perform, anywhere near the level he did last fall training camp, I would think that he will be, the number 2, and we would see more of him, and we probably see still Kane Barong as well, but that's who I would put my money on right now, though.
Yeah, I think that's the safe bet. I think he's got the inside track right now. I think the wild card in this whole thing is going to be Eli Raridon, to be honest with you. I think he is just such an incredible athlete that I don't know if there would be like a kind of similar to what they did with Tyler Buckner last year. He kind of has a small package maybe that he comes in as a receiving tight end, that kind of a thing. He's not a guy
that see that because again, he's not beefy right now, but he's big and he's got skill. Yeah.
You're not going to want to have him attached or doing anything like that, but I mean, again, you don't want to make it obvious that when 9 is on the field that you're doing certain things, but at the same time, he's an incredible athlete. And if he's fully healed, and we're getting word that he is probably going to be full go, if he's fully healed, I think you have to take advantage of him. But you're right. Kevin Bauman, I think, has the inside track right now. Maybe Kane Barong right behind him. But those are the guys that have a little bit more, experience, a little bit more juice, a little bit more, size if they're going to be attached, that kind of a thing. I'm very curious, yes, I want to see who's going to be the number 2, even the number 3 tight end, how much 2 tight end sets they actually do. Was that more of a Brian Kelly thing? Was that more of a Tommy Rees thing? Like where does the 2 tight end sets come into play for Tommy Rees? That's my curiosity.
Right. And I think that, you made a really good point with Raridon, though, because of the fact that, he does have a different skill set than Bauman. Because like I was saying, I think the number 2 is probably going to be more the attached blocking guy. And that gives, Bauman being the most fit, physically put together guy, gives him that opportunity. And even Barong, again, but because of the fact that you've got low depth with running backs and what's going to happen with them. And, you've got some questions at the receiver in terms of who can step up, having Raridon out there on the field along with Michael Mayer. And, I think that you could see that, you could see some mixing and matching of some of that personnel because of the, different kind of skill sets that these guys have.
And Charlie Weiss's last belt loop makes a really good point. They went multiple tight end personnel an awful lot, but they never targeted the second tight end. That never happened because, frankly, they had quarterbacks that weren't going through their progressions, or they were leaving the tight end attached, or whatever they were doing. If you can make that second tight end an actual weapon, an actual thing to be feared, that's only going to open up.
Not just being out there on the field.
That's only going to open up your All-American tight end. It's only going to open up your wide receiver. It's only going to open up your running backs out of the backfield, all of that stuff. So that's a really good point. They have done a very poor job, in my opinion, in the past of utilizing that second tight end, which, look, we had the debate before, is Notre Dame O-line you or tight end you? You got some amazing tight ends. Use them.
Yeah. And again, like Bauman was a touchdown machine early in fall training camp last year, so it felt like there was going to maybe be an opportunity for him. It's just unfortunate that, again, you break your leg in the first game and, then you're out for, I think it was 7 games or something like that. And then he came back a little bit toward the end of the season, but that's a great point. They do need to mix it up, and having guys like Bauman and, and Raridon gives them some of those opportunities. So, kicker was, I know a lot of people are concerned about it. Let's be honest, you should be concerned about it.
Yeah.
Based on what we saw in the spring, when you can't consistently kick 40 to 45-yard field goals indoors, oh my goodness. And, they've got, they bring in the guy with all the experience from Arkansas State, Blake Groupie, and then, Josh Bryant, they just, nobody was consistent at all in the spring.
And it's funny because my takeaway from Josh Bryant prior to the spring was that he never had the leg of the previous kicker at Notre Dame. He never had the booming leg, but he was always right down the middle. Every single time in practice, he was just right down. Maybe because he didn't have any pressure on him because he was never going to start over door, but he was right down the middle every single time, right? Just beautiful arc. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, he could take over as the kicker. And then they bring in Groupie from Arkansas State, and, he and I look eye to eye with each other, which, I mean, again, you don't need to be huge to be a kicker. I'm not saying that, but Yeah,
No, but he's like the epitome of, hey kid, get out of here. They're not signing autographs right now. If
yeah,
like the security guys
seriously.
see Blake Groupie, that's what he
Tiny.
looks like.
He is tiny, and I've stood right next to him. I mean, he's a tiny dude. He's got a ton of confidence. I am extremely confident in him 40 yards and in. But then again, I'm extremely confident in my 15-year-old son 40 yards and in.
Yeah.
So that's the problem.
40 yards and in is not a long field goal.
That's what I'm saying. Like that's the issue. Is like I think he'll be consistent 40 and in, but what about that 40 to 50? Like I feel like that's the sweet spot where if you're a college kicker, that's where you need to be really good. So you're talking from the 30 where the ball is placed from the 30-yard line to the 40-yard line where it's kicked from. That's where you need to be good.
End of half, end of game situations, it drastically changes what you need to do. And, basically you've got to get an extra 10 yards, if not 15 to feel comfortable, with getting him in field goal range.
Absolutely. You need to be inside the 30-yard line. I mean, I should say, you should be inside the 23-yard line because it goes back 7 yards from where the ball is placed, right? So you're telling me that the ball needs to be, that the line of scrimmage needs to be basically in the red zone. That's a problem for me. That's a problem for me. That's not a college kicker. Now, I hope he proves me wrong, but I think there's going to be a legitimate competition between Groupie and Brian, and there should be.
I think there will be too. And, again, like how they put them in some of the, they're going to have to kind of put them to the fire a little bit. In terms of game situations and pressure situations and that kind of stuff. Somebody's going to have to really step up because neither one of them grabbed it by any means in the spring.
Can you just imagine the Ohio State game coming down to a last-second kick? Like, my heart's not ready for that. I'll just say that.
I know.
That's where I'll go with that one.
I know. Punter, I'd be surprised if it's not John Sott, the grad transfer from Harvard. Feel about the same on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the kid from Harvard, I saw him walking around campus during the kicking camp that was going on, and he's just a thick dude. Like he's a big, thick kid. I mean, he's 5'10", 207 pounds. Okay. So he's just a big, thick kid. So I haven't actually seen him kick, but I would imagine that he's probably going to win the job. It's going to be between him and the McPherson kid, who's a freshman, right, coming in. So it's going to be between a graduate student and a freshman. Frankly, I don't care who it is. As long as you kick it where you need to kick it and you can directionally put it where you want to put it, that's fantastic. I think Notre Dame has dealt with some inconsistent punting for quite a while. So it's not going to kill you. But if you can get a kid that can flip the field for you, play the field game, the field position game, which could very well come into play on September 3rd, somebody's got to take hold of that job too. And I don't think that it's set in stone yet.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, as of right now, kicking game is one of my biggest concerns for this team. And, it's like they've really been spoiled over the last few years with what they've got, because even as shaky as Jonathan Dorr was at times, he went through a stretch where he was really consistent. And for the most part, he made kicks that he was supposed to make, in the more, clutch type situations. And so it's, you get a guy like Groupie with all the experience that he has, you expect him to be able to step up in those situations. But I think we all know there's a little bit different pressure at Notre Dame than there is at Arkansas State.
Just a little, just a little. But for a kicker,
that's not even a hot take.
It's like being a pitcher. You got to be able to block that stuff out. You have to. And if you can't block that stuff out, you're not going to be a good kicker. And you have to hit the layups. You got to hit everything 40 and in. You have to, but pending a bad snap and all that, which is out of your control. But you've got to hit everything 40 and in. It's that 40 to 50, man. That's what worries me. It does.
All right, Vince. Let's change the tone. You ready for rapid fire?
Favorite part of the show. Let's do it.
All right, here we go. Which Tyler Buckner number will be greater this season? His rushing touchdowns or his interception total?
I've been pondering this question for like a week, if I'm being honest.
And Vince actually came up with this one. He was like, telling me all last week or, about how he couldn't come up with rapid fire questions. And then he texts me this, and it's like, well, man, that's gold right there.
Oh man, I tell you what, what brought it to my attention was people are talking about, would this stat line for Tyler Buckner be something that Notre Dame could live with? Could this stat line, that kind of a thing? And it's always, yards, interceptions, and touchdowns, right? And a lot of people have him throwing 10 interceptions, like double-digit interceptions. Maybe that's true, but I don't see that being the case. I think he'll be in the high single digits, but I don't think he hits double digits. I think he does hit double digits when it comes to rushing touchdowns. So I'll be the optimist on this one. I'll take rushing touchdowns, but the more people talk about how many interceptions they think he's going to throw, the more it deters me a little bit. But I think he's going to be one heck of a weapon in the red zone when it comes to his legs, obviously, things of that nature, kind of a Deshaun Kaiser type thing.
Yes.
And I just don't think he's going to throw a ton of interceptions. Yeah, he's going to make some mistakes. He's a first-year starter, but I don't think he throws 10.
Well, in the first thing I thought of when this question came up was Brandon Wimbush, 2017, because it's like, again, and I'm not going to say, I'm not saying that Tyler Buckner is Brandon Wimbush or whatever, but we're talking about a mobile quarterback, a guy who can run and that kind of thing. Wimbush obviously had consistency issues with the completion percentage and all that kind of stuff. But he ran for 14 touchdowns that year. He only threw 6 interceptions, for whatever, issues he had, making his layups, getting him out there to the flat and that kind of stuff. He only threw 6 interceptions. Now they could lean on a really dominant running game, because remember, they ran for like 1 million yards a game that year behind Quentin Nelson and Mike McGlinchey, and they had Josh Adams as well, and Wimbush was their second leading rusher. But it's like, I think Buckner is going to be better as a passer than what we saw last season. I think 10 is probably what I would put his ceiling for the interceptions. Right around there, which would not be an alarming number. Remember, Jack Cohn threw 7 last year. So 10 interceptions for a first-time starter who is more, dual threat than what we've seen since Brandon Wimbush. And, again, Wimbush with 14, I think that Buckner is going to be in that vicinity. So I think that, along just like you. So based on that, I think that he'll end up with more rushing touchdowns than interceptions. He might have his share of interceptions, but I still think he's going to have more rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, I do too. His legs are going to be a tough thing to stop. And like I said, I think he's going to be a weapon inside the red zone, where Notre Dame needs to be a lot more efficient. So I think that's going to be a real focus for Notre Dame.
Yep. Okay, fill in the blank on this next one. Vin Scully passed away yesterday at the age of 94. He was the voice of the I shouldn't say Los Angeles Dodgers, the Dodgers, because it went all the way back to Brooklyn.
Yep,
the Brooklyn / Los Angeles Dodgers. That's right. For an amazing 67 years. The voice of the Dodgers for 67 years. When you think of Vin Scully, you think of blank.
I'm going to get so much grief for this, and I get it. I understand why I'm about to get the grief. But I got to be honest, Sean. When I think of Vin Scully, I think of the movie For Love of the Game. I'm sorry. I didn't
Billy Chapel.
Yes. And the beautiful prose.
The cathedral that is Yankee Stadium.
Yes. Yes. The sun sets on, all this other, the prose he was using and all this stuff. Look, I know who Vin Scully is. Obviously, I'm a baseball fan. I didn't grow up listening to Vin Scully. He was a Dodgers announcer. I didn't listen to any Dodgers games. And over the past day, I've come to learn that he also did the catch for Joe Montana, and he did some other things.
You had to bring that up.
I'm sorry.
Yes, he used to do NFL football back in the day as well. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So I
just ruined my day.
I know. I'm sorry. I appreciate that. But I never really listened to him do anything live growing up.
See, I was lucky that in the 80s, he was still doing, like he was calling the World Series. He was doing national, when there were more national, baseball broadcasts that people actually watch. So like he was one of the voices of the World Series in the 80s. And we're going to hear a couple of his calls here in just a minute. But, like when I think of Vin Scully, I just think of the joy of baseball, that smooth, velvety voice. It's time for Dodgers baseball. And he just had that such a, like I said, joyful, soulful, distinct voice.
Sure.
And like I remember his last couple years having MLB Network, like I don't know if you had MLB Network. So like even if you couldn't watch Dodgers games, like every once in a while they'd have him on. And I just remembered like, every time that I would hear him doing a Dodgers game, when I'd flip by MLB, of course this would be 10:30 at night because they're playing out on the West Coast. I was just like, why does this have to end?
Sure.
Can't we keep, but he was, he passed away at 94. He did it for so long.
Yeah.
And just, so that voice is what I think of first, and the joy that he had for being at the ballpark. That was so great. And again, I was fortunate that I got to grow up getting to hear him do more national games. The shame of it was, apparently, like Fox over the last several years had tried to get him, to come in and be a part, of the World Series, even for like just an inning or two or something like that. And he didn't want the attention. And I don't think he realized how much, like people would have really loved to have him be a part of that again, even if just for an inning or two during a World Series. I think that would have been great.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, I was kind of joking about the movie, but not, because when I think of that movie, I think of his voice though. Like that's what I think about when I think about that movie, not the love story and all that other nonsense. I think of him talking about Billy Chappell and like calling that game. Like that's what I think about when I think of that movie.
Yeah.
And that's probably the most I've ever heard him do a game before. I've seen the replays and the Kirk Gibsons and all that stuff, but like I've never I didn't see it live by any stretch. So it's like, that's what I remember.
I found out today he was the first announcer to use the term breaking ball. The first one to do that. I did not know that until today. I know. And I just cannot fathom doing anything for 67 years. Like my dad is 76 years old. He just turned 76 not quite a month ago. If he had been doing something for 67 years, he would have been 9 when he started. It's like, I just can't imagine. And he was just one of the best for that entire time. And Father David Penny said the way he would let the moment breathe was always brilliant. He knew when to speak and when not to. No one better. And I think that really, and we're going to hear some, I'm going to go ahead and play a couple of his calls, 2 of the more famous ones right now, and you will hear what Father David Penny was saying about letting the moment breathe, after these big moments happen. So I'll go ahead and punch this up right now. We've got the Kirk Gibson 1988 World Series home run and the Mookie Wilson Bill Buckner play from 1986. He was calling both of them World Series back in the 80s.
And look good. All year long, they looked to him to light the fire, and all year long, he answered the demands until he was physically unable to start tonight with 2 bad legs, the bad left hamstring and the swollen right knee. And with 2 out, you talk about a roll of the dice. This is it. If he hits the ball on the ground, I would imagine he would be running 50% to first base. So the Dodgers trying to catch lightning right now. So Mike Davis, the tying run, is at second base with 2 out. Now the Dodgers don't need the muscle of Gibson as much as a base hit. And on deck is the leadoff man, Steve Sachs. 3-2. Sachs waiting on deck, but the game right now is at the plate. High high fly ball into right field. She is gone. Can you believe this ball gave a shake? Oh, brother. So the winning run is at second base with 2 out, 3-2 to Mookie Wilson. Little roller up along first, behind the bag. It gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win it.
And so you can hear, you know, the crowd noise there at the end. That Gibson one I edited a little bit more. Like the whole at bat took like 9.5 minutes or something. Like so I kind of edited it together a little bit. But again, you could hear after Gibson hits the home run, he doesn't, you know, blah 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 blah, you know, talking all over. He did the same thing, calling Hank Aaron's 715th home run. And as a guy, you know, who will never be in Vin Scully's league, but at the same time was fortunate, you know, to call baseball games for a long time. That's the biggest thing that I learned. You know, like we played, you know, the Notre Dame, you know, comeback against Rice at the College World Series from 2002 when we did those interviews. And that's like after the Stanley triple, I shut up, you know, and like let the moment breathe for a little bit. After the home run by Stavisky, I shut up and you let it breathe and, you know, let the crowd noise in and all that kind of good stuff. That is the biggest thing that, you know, that I was able to take from Vin Scully. But, you know, he was just such an ambassador for the sport of baseball and so great at what he did.
Well, and he never, from what I read, I think earlier today, or maybe it was yesterday, is that he never had a color guy. He just did it by himself. And that
he wanted to do it that way.
He didn't need one. Like he didn't need one because he understood how to get a broadcast out there. And you can speak from experience on this one. I mean, but you know, having one and not having one, it's a way different way to call a game, you know, when it comes to that. And
well,
more and more people don't understand, especially on the TV side, they're putting 2 and 3 people in the booth where they just feel like they have to be talking all the time.
But again, none of these, especially like on ESPN, none of the broadcasts ever breathe, you know, and like we were talking, you know, like Jesse was talking yesterday about Boog Sciambi, you know, on Marquee, and the fact that he never really lets it breathe. And you know, you can say that about a lot of these guys because there's too much. And like, there were so many different videos that I saw people tweeting of Vin Scully just telling stories. Like he was telling a story about Madison Bumgarner, the pitcher for the San Francisco Giants. You know, like he was home on his ranch or something, I think in Texas someplace, and he and his wife found this rattlesnake, and you know, they chopped up the snake, and inside there were 2 baby rabbits inside this snake. And one of the rabbits lived and they nursed it back to health. And then they released it back out in the wild. This is a story that Vin Scully told, you know, in the course of a broadcast. And there was one that Kevin Millar tweeted. Millar grew up in the Los Angeles area, I guess. And so, you know, Scully is telling the story. He's calling, you know, Kevin Millar's first game back playing for another team against the Dodgers. His dad bought $3,000 worth of tickets for all his friends, you know, and in the course of this story, boom, Kevin Millar hits a home run, you know, and he's like, that home run for his dad is worth more than that $3,000 that he spent on tickets. And that's just like the greatness of Vin Scully. He didn't need a color analyst because he was able to tell stories like that and be his own color analyst.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's not going to ever be anybody like him. It's just not possible. It's not, because you'll never see anybody working solo like that anymore.
That's right. Now, I know you were young. Did you see either of those World Series moments, the Gibson home run or the Buckner play, you know, Mookie Wilson Buckner play, you know, live when they actually happened?
No, I was 5 and 7 years old at the time, so I definitely did not see either one of those.
Did you watch the Notre Dame Miami game in 1988? Notre Dame's. Did you see that live?
I did not see it live, but I remember like the atmosphere. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like I remember it going on at the time. That's what I remember. I didn't sit down and watch the game because my dad wasn't a big Notre Dame fan, but they happened on the same day, didn't it?
That's what I was getting ready to say.
Yeah.
That's what's amazing. And it never registered for me because I watched both of those games. I watched the Notre Dame Miami game in the afternoon. I watched the World Series game at night. This is when I was in the Army out in California, and I watched them in 2 different day rooms in the same building. The day room is basically, it's like, kind of like the common area, and there'd always be little TVs out there. Watch both of those on the same day.
Crazy.
And it never, like, I just remember watching both of those games, but literally until a couple of years ago, I had never even thought about the fact that they both happened on the same day, and 2 such amazing games and moments happening, on the same day.
That has to be, I mean, I'm sure that there's others to make the list, but that's got to be one of the best sports days in the history of sports. I mean, it has to be with those are 2 pretty iconic situations to happen on the same day. Plain
Exactly.
So, and I didn't realize that was the case either until I saw somebody mention it yesterday when all of this was going on, and it was a Notre Dame fan, obviously. And it's like, we were at the game and then we went back to the hotel and we watched the World Series in South Bend. It was like, wow, that's a heck of a day right there.
I know, no kidding. To be able to be at the game, I mean, that's a different level. I wonder if they had a Catholics versus Convicts t-shirt.
I know, right?
Okay, Vince, fill in the blank. It's blank that Tom Brady is 45 years old today.
Makes me feel young. He makes me feel young that there's still people in the NFL that are older than me. Like,
Keep doing it.
At some point, he's going to retire, and I will be older than everybody in the NFL. That moment has not come, and I am very happy about it. He keeps me young.
A couple nuggets that I also learned today. The original Star Wars, Star Wars, I guess it's episode 6 or something like that. But the original one, the first Star Wars movie they ever made was the #1 movie at the box office when Tom Brady was born in 1977.
Yep, it's episode 4. And
was it episode 4? Okay.
Yeah.
To me, it was just Star Wars. And I saw that in the movie theater, and then it had all the Star Wars figurines and all that stuff.
Yeah. I get
it. The action toys. But yeah.
Yeah,
and 13 NFL head coaches are currently younger than Tom Brady.
Okay, that makes me feel old, actually, because there's 13 NFL coaches who are basically my age, essentially, or younger.
Yeah.
Which that hurts in a lot of ways.
Yep.
But
coaches are getting younger, though.
Yeah, they are. That's like the thing, is to take a chance on a younger coach, that kind of a thing. I mean, it's happening around here at the high school level, too.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. You're saying. Your guy, Frank Karcheski. We're not allowed to call him Frankie anymore. I think he's just Coach Frank now is what they call him. So.
Is that what they call him? Yeah, I'm actually going to meet with him tomorrow. But, the fact that somebody I coached is now a head coach is just weird. It's just weird. I don't like it. That makes me feel
Well, the other irony is he's got his former high school head coach as a position coach for him.
That's also very true. That's a very good point. Very good point.
Yep. How things have changed. And that was only 10 years ago or something like that. I think. So
2012.
Well, Vince, you are a coach. I've coached. Mm-hmm. And the thing that probably ticks coaches off the most is when they have to coach effort. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Because that's something you can control. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And this has been, kind of something that I've heard debated. People we know have debated this in the past. Where do you stand on either praising or noting a player's effort, in the course of a game as a member of the media, not as a coach, obviously, but, you're watching a game and, and you're noting, oh man, he plays, a lot of times you hear the analysts, oh man, he plays hard. And, it's like, well, they lost. Well, but they played hard, that kind of stuff. Where do you stand on that kind of thing?
As a coach, as I first started reading this, and I was like, oh, he's going to ask me if I praise, my players on their effort, right? Of course you do, because you want them to be an example and all of that, et cetera, et cetera.
Positive reinforcement. You want them to keep doing it.
And you don't want to have to do that. You want everybody to give 100% effort all the time, but that's not reality, right?
Yes.
So as a coach, you got to do it. as a media member, that's not your role, man. Like, that is not your place, in my opinion. And we're talking media members. That means they're covering most likely either a college or a professional athlete. I'm sorry. If I have to commend your effort and you're getting paid millions of dollars, there's a problem there. Like, why am I calling you out in a positive way for your effort when you should be giving me effort regardless? Okay. And that goes with college players too, because, whether you're getting an NIL or whether you're getting a scholarship or whatever, I shouldn't have to compliment you on your effort. That's how I feel about it. That's not a media member's place. You can
again, we're not doing it to their face. We're doing it, in the course of a broadcast or, on a podcast or a radio show or whatever it happens.
I am not a fan of that at all, to be honest with you. I will comment on their play all day long, but not the effort. Sorry, that should be a given.
Yeah, I do agree. It should be a given, but I think that maybe where it comes up sometimes is because of the fact that you do have inconsistent playing levels from one player to the next, that maybe it does come up. I don't think it should be, like the first thing that you have to talk about. Oh, they're still playing hard, and if you're having a losing season, maybe it becomes notable, and that kind of thing. But and I guess that's just what I said, because of the fact that it should be a given, but it is not always a given. I can see where maybe, you would make note of it from time to time. I don't think it should be something where you heap praise on somebody for it, but I can see where it is notable from time to time.
I will say, if there's let me draw a line in the sand. You and I do high school stuff together, right?
Right.
I will praise a kid's effort all day at the high school level. From a broadcast standpoint, right? Because there's certain guys that are diving on the floor and they're doing all kinds of good stuff, or in basketball or whatever.
Effort level looks a lot different at that level because of of what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Because effort level at the high school level can get you a lot of success. You know what I mean? And you love that, and you want that, and absolutely. I will heap praise on a kid for that. Levels higher than that, if there's like a singular play where you can say that was a great effort on that play, sure. Somebody dives into the stands to try to catch a foul ball.
That play if he doesn't, give all effort or whatever.
I could see that. But from he brings his lunch pail every day, like all that kind of stuff. Like, his lunch pail's full of millions of dollars. He should.
Yeah, I can go over. And that's kind of where definitely once we start getting into professional sports,
right?
Then to me it's more like, I don't think you should be praising anyone for their effort at that level. You should only be noting the guys who don't give the effort.
Yes, absolutely. I'll call them out all day. I'll call guys out all day on not giving effort, but not the other way around.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. I was just curious what you thought about that, because we're going to be jumping back into to seeing these guys going live here pretty soon.
Can't wait.
Absolutely. Hey, don't forget, hit that like button if you don't mind. Rate us, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Vince is going to be back one more time tomorrow. And I think now you're going to be with me tomorrow.
Yes.
And then after you get done with practice Friday, you're going to be going on the podcast with Brian. Is that right? To talk about practice?
Yep. I believe that is accurate. Yep.
Okay. So we'll have that immediate reaction after the practice Friday, and of course I'll be transcribing it and writing Friday afternoon.
Head first into the beat writer mode, and
that's right. Jump over on irishbreakdown.com later on and read all about it. Is what you'll be able to do.
Absolutely, because we get to talk to Marcus Freeman on Friday, right? And then Tommy Reese on Saturday. So they've got a whole, they're planning them all out. So absolutely,
that's right. All right. Well, thanks for joining us as always. We will talk to you tomorrow one more time, our last day without football. It all starts Friday. We're ready for that. We will talk to you tomorrow, though, right here on IB Nation Sports Talk.